bad feeling about this.
Hey, what's up everyone, it's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're going to be taking a look at the all-time classic, Star Wars. It's really hard to believe that it's been almost half a century since the release of A New Hope, and that the universe is still expanding to this day. Call me old-fashioned, but I feel like the original two trilogies will always stand above the rest no matter what. And for that reason, it'll be the main focus of today's video. On that note, let's get right into it. Here are 5 theories about Star Wars too good not to be true. This theory comes to us by way of Strawberry Volvic 32 and concerns the following scene.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
At first glance, this sounds like Vader enticing Luke to join the dark side by glorifying the power that comes along with it. But what if it was actually the opposite? That Darth Vader was in fact warning Luke of the power of the dark side and the total control it had gained over him. This interpretation is further exemplified by the second part of his statement.
I must obey my master.
Vader's implying that some part of him doesn't want to carry out the will of the dark side, but at the same time, he's powerless to resist and fight back. So it seems like Darth Vader's main purpose was to warn Luke of the power of the dark side, but it's also very possible he was trying to convey multiple things. One way to view it is Vader apologizing for being too weak to join him. Another explanation could be that Darth Vader's so beat down, he's making a cry for help, and I can even see it as a warning to Luke of the overwhelming power of Darth Sidious, and how the only thing that can come from resisting is pain and suffering. But regardless, I find it difficult to believe that Darth Vader made this statement to glorify the power of the dark side, and if anything, it shows just how helpless he felt.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
Apparently, this theory's made its way around the internet several times, but nonetheless, it attempts to explain exactly how Obi-Wan beat Anakin in their duel, and why the phrase, "don't try it," is so telling. Looking back on the battle, Anakin seemed to be winning the fight, with him on the offensive the majority of the time. But on second glance, this assumption is actually a little misleading, as Anakin being the aggressor is all due to his chosen style of lightsaber combat. If you didn't already know, there are a total of 7 forms of lightsaber combat in the Star Wars universe, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and differing uses. Although Obi-Wan was Anakin's master and likely taught him everything he knew, the two practiced different forms of lightsaber combat. Obi-Wan was partial to Form 3, known for its heavy focus on defense, examining every move the enemy made, and then exploiting openings that most often came about from physical exhaustion or mental frustration. On the other side of things, Anakin was a practitioner of Form 5, which was actually an evolution of Form 3 by people who saw the need for better offensive capabilities. Hopefully, this explains why even though it may have seemed that Anakin had the upper hand, the fight was simply playing out according to their forms of lightsaber combat. But what this doesn't explain is the final sequence of events that leads to Obi-Wan chopping Anakin's legs off.
Don't try it!
The funny thing about Anakin's failed technique is that we've seen this exact move before, executed by none other than Obi-Wan. Back in Episode 1, Qui-Gon Jinn had just been killed by Darth Maul, and Obi-Wan takes it upon himself to exact revenge for his fallen master. He holds his own, but is eventually forced into a precarious spot, hanging onto a ledge with Darth Maul standing over him. In a last-ditch effort, Obi-Wan uses the Force to launch himself behind Maul, thereby catching the Sith Lord off guard and then slicing him in two. It's important to note that following the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan actually changed from one of the most aggressive styles of lightsaber combat to Form 3, the most defensive-minded form. And in the years that followed, Obi-Wan is able to master his craft, with Mace Windu even calling him the best defensive duelist of all time. So even though Obi-Wan's attack on Darth Maul went much better than Anakin's attack on him, it probably started to dawn on him that he got a little bit lucky in pulling off that move. Obi-Wan would have realized the technique is inherently high risk, high reward. If you pull it off, it's capable of surprising your opponent and gives you the chance to land a devastating blow. But on the other hand, a Jedi skilled in defense might be able to take advantage of your vulnerability in the air. Being a defensive genius, Obi-Wan no doubt racked his brain and came up with a perfect counter against the very technique he used to kill Darth Maul, on the off chance that someone might try to use it against him. It's also not the first time that Obi-Wan's been shown to learn from his past battles. As in Star Wars Rebels, he easily defeats Darth Maul when he attacks with the same technique that killed Qui-Gon Jinn 20 years earlier. So, as Darth Maul was the first Sith Lord to reveal himself in over 1,000 years, it goes without saying that Anakin would have heard the story of how his master killed the Sith Lord more than a few times. I can see Anakin being enthralled with the offense of such a daring move, and then tuning out any warnings from Obi-Wan of the potential dangers associated with it. After all, Obi-Wan was successful in killing Darth Maul with it. All of this leads back to the duel between Master and Padawan on Mustafar, with Obi-Wan now taking the same position that Darth Maul once had on him. I think you have to consider two major things here. First, Obi-Wan had replayed the event that led to his victory over Maul hundreds, if not thousands of times in his head. And second, it's very likely a scenario he and Anakin had went over more than a couple times in the past, which explains why Obi-Wan says this.
Don't try it!
He specifically uses the word "it" because he knows exactly what Anakin's planning on doing. Anakin understands the situation as well, but views the statement as a challenge from his former master rather than a warning from a friend.
But you'll need to prove yourself as your undoing.
In his blind rage, Anakin probably thought, I'm so damn powerful, it doesn't matter if you know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do it regardless and pull it off even better than you did against Maul. But as we all know, that doesn't end up happening. Obi-Wan Kenobi has one of the most recognizable names in the Star Wars universe, but what if we've been saying it wrong this entire time? This theory was posted to Reddit by user Joris C and proposes the following: that Obi-Wan Kenobi's real name is Wan Ken, and the Obi attached to both sides of his name is simply an honorific. If we take a look at honorifics in modern society, the first examples that come to mind for most people is Mr. and Mrs. They're considered to be a prefix as they come before the stated name, but there also exist cultures that place honorifics after a name. The most famous example being in Japan, where the use of titles such as San, Sama, and Chan are all but required in formal settings. Going back to Star Wars, it's possible that on Obi-Wan's home planet, in formal conversations, the honorific Obi is placed both at the beginning and end of a name. And when the Jedi came to speak to his parents about him joining the Academy, a formal conversation is exactly what would have taken place. They would have introduced their son as Obi-Wan Ken Obi, and the Jedi, unaware of their customs, assumed that was his full name. As he was a little kid, it's not out of the question that Wan Ken never corrected the mistake, as they were his elders, and like I said, he was super young. It's also a possibility that he didn't correct them for a very different reason. If you look at the situation, Wan Ken was being taken away from his family, his home, by absolute strangers to a faraway land he had never even heard of before. And I can see him holding on to the honorifics as a last vestige or reminder of where he once came from. In the Star Wars universe, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone stronger than Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord orchestrated the fall of the Republic, ruled over the universe as the Emperor, and even managed to cheat death until he was finally defeated. All of this begs the question, how did Darth Sidious become so damn powerful? To answer this question, we have to take a look at the first lesson that every Sith is made to learn. They are taught to indulge in feelings of anger, hatred, and passion, and the cultivation of these emotions at a young age were certainly the major driving forces behind Palpatine's rise to power. But what if there is more to it than that? This theory on Reddit proposes a pretty crazy idea, that Darth Sidious's power is not only derived from intense anger and hatred, but he also draws immense strength from his unbridled sexual energy. Now I know I just dropped a bomb, and some of you are probably thinking, what the f is this guy talking about? So allow me to explain. When I say that Palpatine draws power from sexual energy, I'm not just saying that he's a horny old man. But to put it bluntly, Palpatine's a bit of a freak. Because when you take a look at the facts, he gets off on hurting other people. In other words, Palpatine is a sexual sadist. Sexual sadism is described as the infliction of physical or psychological suffering on another person to stimulate sexual excitement and orgasm. Obviously, they can never go and outright say that Palpatine was in effect having orgasms from hurting his foes, but we get some pretty big hints that this was the case in many scenes. And all those scenes have one thing in common. It's Palpatine's Force Lightning, his preferred method to torture. Just take a look at Palpatine when he's using Force Lightning. The guy is in a state of immense pleasure. Contrast that with Count Dooku when he's doing the same thing, and there's no comparison. Darth Sidious is clearly getting a ton of pleasure and excitement from the pain he's causing, while for Count Dooku, it's just a job. I think it's also crucial to mention Palpatine's extensive history of torturing people. The best example of this in the movies is Palpatine relentlessly barbecuing Luke until Vader finally stops him. But in Star Wars canon, the list of incidents involving Sidious and torture seems almost endless. There was one time after the destruction of the Death Star where Darth Sidious had the architect, Bevel Lemelisk, fed to flesh-eating piranha beetles. It took him over an hour to die, and then afterwards, Sidious had him revived and then killed him again. In total, Palpatine executed Lemelisk 7 times through various methods, including throwing him out of an airlock, lowering him into a vat of molten copper, and trapping him in a vault with clouds of acid mist. But maybe the biggest victim of Palpatine's cruelty was Darth Vader himself. Anytime that Vader even slightly did something not to Palpatine's liking, the consequences were severe and brutal. Every method of torture was on the table for Darth Sidious, including force choking, electrocution, ripping off Vader's limbs, and even making Darth Vader burn again in the same place that Obi-Wan once left him. All of this brings us back to the definition of a sexual sadist: infliction of physical or psychological suffering on another person to stimulate sexual excitement and orgasm. I find it really hard to believe that Darth Sidious committed all these acts of horror just because he was evil. The level of torture, painstaking detail, psychological control, and pleasure derived from another's pain are all classic signs of a sadist. I think of it like this: if Palpatine never became a Sith Lord, he'd probably be an intergalactic serial killer with his face planted on wanted posters all across the galaxy. But since he did in fact become a Sith, it makes sense that he became the most powerful user of the dark side in history. Like all the other Sith Lords, Palpatine had the prerequisite of hate and anger. But because he literally got off on hurting other people, Darth Sidious was able to draw power from a whole different type of emotions and feelings than any Sith before him. Funny enough, the actor who played Palpatine, Ian McDiarmid, basically confirmed this theory with the following quote: "These are crocodile tears, but for all those in the movie, and perhaps watching the movie itself, they'll see he is apparently moved. And of course, he is. He can just do it. He can, as it were, turn it on. And I suppose for him, it's also a bit of a turn on. The pure exercise of power is what he's all about. That's the only thing he's interested in, and the only thing that can satisfy him." A person who is considered Force-sensitive can be described as having a strong connection to the Force, enough to at least feel some inkling of its power. It was the main qualifying factor for a young child to be brought to the Jedi Academy. However, it goes without saying that some Force-sensitives fell through the cracks and were never recruited. Reddit user Whence It Came postulates that one such Force-sensitive who never quite became a Jedi is everyone's favorite scoundrel, Han Solo. Because Han Solo was never trained in the ways of the Jedi, the abilities he displays as a Force-sensitive are all unconscious, such as enhanced reflexes and minor glimpses of precognition. I believe there's many examples of his powers throughout the Star Wars films, so let's go over some of the more obvious ones. One thing you have to consider is how Han Solo even came into the picture in the first place. Obi-Wan described Mos Eisley as a wretched hive of scum and villainy, and out of all the potential smugglers, they happened upon Han Solo. In my mind, this wasn't just random luck, and instead, Obi-Wan was able to sense Han's latent Force abilities and chose him based on that criteria. In the next episode, Han Solo proves that Obi-Wan made the correct decision when he flies into the asteroid field. C-3PO says this about the crazy undertaking.
successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
Surely, there's no chance that Han Solo's just that lucky. The more likely explanation is that Solo used his enhanced reflexes and precognition to avoid all the asteroids. Another instance of Han's otherworldly abilities comes in Return of the Jedi during the battle over the Sarlacc pit. Just watch how this scene unfolds.
Don't move, Lando! Oh, wait, I thought you were flying!
It's all right, I can see a lot better.
Don't move! A little higher! A little higher!
Han says that he can see a lot better, but I call BS. It sounds to me like he's just trying to reassure Lando because he actually can't see a damn thing.
I think my eyes are getting better. Instead of a big dark blur, I see a big light blur.
But he also knows that Lando's screwed either way, so he might as well try and just hope to get lucky. And as we all know,
I call it luck.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
also later in the film, Han says the following.
Hey, you awake?
Yeah, I just got a funny feeling, like I'm not gonna see her again.
His premonition ends up not coming true, although the claim did have some merit, as they were running straight into the Empire's trap. So the old trilogies did a lot to suggest that Han Solo was a Force sensitive, and I think there's already enough evidence to say that was in fact the case. But if it wasn't already clear enough, The Force Awakens puts the nail in the coffin. I mean, come on, if that doesn't convince you, I don't think anything will. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe for more stuff like this. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.